welcome everybody. Today is the June 18th, 2019 Board of County Commissioners work session. And Commissioner Postman is gone to Washington to do some lobbying for the CORE Act. And Commissioner Newman is not here also, so we have just three of us here today. So first up, we have a citizen board interview with Ashley McGee. And Ashley, could you come on up to the seat up here, please?
Nice to see you again.
Round two.
Yeah. Just make sure that mic is on. Yeah,
start.
perfect.
So,
Yes.
Ashley, we interviewed you several months ago for the Healthy Rivers and Streams Board, which we had a lot of applications for that. And we urged you to apply look at the other available boards that there were. And I'm pleased that you did find one that you applied to be on the
Yeah.
Senior Services Council. So,
Thank you. Yeah, I definitely am interested.
so could you maybe tell us about the process you went through with your mind and why you picked the Senior Council for what you wanted to do?
Sure. So you had suggested to look for the weed and not just grass. And I was just, again, back to the healthy rivers and streams, too. I didn't quite understand what I was getting myself into. And I was like, well, maybe I should actually look into this a little bit more. So this time, when I landed on the senior services, it's just really more of a cause that I'm just passionate about in general. I volunteer for the senior center and do Meals on Wheels, and I had spoken to Mary Barber about it. And I'm just a big fan of what she does in general for the community, and I would love to be a part of that. And I think there's a side of me that my dad is 76 years old, and he's back in Alabama, and this just kind of, because I can't be back home with him, it makes me feel like I'm still spending time with our elders of the community, because it's important.
Well, we have a few old geezers on the senior council that you could they could be surrogate fathers to you.
Well, are you talking about yourself?
Well, yeah, maybe. I'm not 76 though, but.
Well, I just think it's great. I think it's great. We really were enthusiastic about you when you were here before. I think this will be a great fit. There's obviously vacancies. It's fun. They do amazing adventures, and there's always something going on out there, and I think that you will love it.
Yeah, they're always asking me, they're like, come over for yoga. And I'm like, you guys have yoga? But, and Mary, she just did a volunteer lunch for us just a month ago, and I just love being a part of it, and everybody's just so friendly, and you never know who lives right around the corner from you, when you're at the senior center. And
the stories
And
are
the stories,
amazing.
exactly. Just to sit down, and get lost in a lunch before I know it. I've been there for 2 hours, and I'm like, okay, I got to get back to work. But, yes, I do enjoy just spending time over there, so I would be honored to be a part of this. And
It'd be great.
All right.
Good. Yeah, thank you for persisting. I know the Elections Commission wasn't going to be a good fit because they don't meet.
Right.
Only upon called. So your enthusiasm is best suited for where some real work could be done. And, I think bridging the generational divide is excellent and needed. So thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
So we have vacancies now, so I would like to make a decision and appoint
Well,
Ashley
there are, the way the senior council works, that people actually can be term limited off of it. So we'll have really active members who will serve for 4 years, and then they automatically are rotated off.
Okay.
And then they can come back after a year. So we've lost a couple of longtime members just real recently, and so there's almost always vacancies, and the council always welcomes anyone with interest to participate. So, and there actually is an event next Tuesday, the summer soiree. I'm not sure if you had seen
No, I
publicity
haven't
about
seen
that.
it. No, I usually check the calendar but I've been out of town for work for quite some time, so I haven't gotten back into the. Tomorrow I deliver again for Meals on Wheels, so I'll
So
get my
you'll find
calendar. Yeah.
So it will be when we're having our meeting here. I won't
Okay.
be able to be there,
Oh.
but it starts at 10 o'clock. Is that right, Chad?
Okay.
10 till 2 o'clock about at the senior center.
At the senior center, that's great.
Yeah, and
Okay.
there will be lots of, this is a publicity opportunity for the event, actually. that
Okay.
There will be lots of different community organizations there who will have booths and be talking to people and handing out information. And there will be prize drawings for, is that like a raffle, Chad? Where they'll have a. There's some
specific.
system. There are lots of good prizes from the community that have been donated by the community. So
That's great.
you're welcome to come to that and just
Love to.
get your feet wet a little bit
Yeah.
at the senior
Summer soiree.
the
Yeah,
activity.
I would like to appoint Ashley, and then we do it by resolution, so it would come back at our regular meeting on the 26th.
Okay.
So if we have to do a formal appointment, so if the board is.
And you don't
in
need to attend for that. You can watch.
You can watch us on
online.
Grassroots.
Your attendance isn't required.
Yeah, I
You
would,
can live
I would
stream us while you're
concur
doing
with that.
Meals on Wheels.
Oh, fantastic.
I know that we were all impressed with your resume and everything before.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
And so, I mean, I would feel good about just saying right now that to John to bring Ashley's name back in the resolution.
Yeah,
to be
next week would be
appointed.
great.
We can do that.
I found the live stream from last time, and I was
Oh,
like,
so you-
oh my God, that is mortifying. Like, that is.
It's amazing how many people watched us.
Right. I just
Get the
you guys
grocery
do this
store and
every
they'll say,
week, and-
you should wear more green on TV. I'm like, are you kidding me?
like, I've got some ideas for you.
It's
great.
Like, oh my
So,
God.
I'm not actually a member of the senior council, but I go as a county commissioner representative at the meetings, and they are really fun meetings. It's always a good group of people, and
Yeah, it
we
seems
feel
that already.
like we accomplish a lot of good.
Oh, that's great.
And it's also, we'll look forward to having you come to the meetings.
Oh, thank you so much.
Yes, great. Thank you.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it.
Yeah. Okay, thanks.
Nice to
Congrats.
see you.
Thank you.
Nice to see y'all, and thank you for driving my direction a little bit. and helping me figure this out, so. Okay, take care.
Thanks.
Thanks.
So next we have David Peshnichak who is our transportation coordinator expert. I don't know your official title, David.
Transportation
So he'll be
Administrator.
giving us an update on the EOTC meeting, which will be this Thursday at 4 o'clock.
That's correct.
It is really nasty outside right now.
Yep.
We appreciate the moisture, though.
Yeah.
Let's have a monitor
Do we
for it.
know how to sign in?
Mm-hmm.
You should just have to hit return and then just hit the arrow. There you go. Is that what you need? Yeah. Okay. Let's see. Put too much stuff on here.
He's showing us how
Sorry.
busy he's been.
Yeah.
Okay, we're impressed. We are so impressed.
My-
He's busy. He's a busy man. Has a busy
Putting
page
too
there.
much on my USB drive, apparently. All right, well, the purpose of this meeting is to prepare for the EOTC meeting coming up this Thursday, June 20th, and to give you the opportunity to ask any questions now that you've received your packet, get any clarifications, and also give you the chance to discuss anything amongst yourselves that you may want to before you're in front of the full group. So there's a few things that I'd like to go over. The first one is going over the decisions reached from the March 21st meeting. So if you'll recall, we're still moving that off the primary EOTC meeting to try to free up time with the big group. And then go over an update on the EOTC funding. I understand that you guys have had a certain background with that, talking to the finance director. and then going over the action items that are coming up this Thursday and let you know what we'll be expecting in terms of decisions and actions from the full group. And then any questions or comments you have on updates that will be coming up on Thursday as well. So to go through the decisions reached, so we had several items that we went through on March 21st. The first one was the impacts from the RAFTA ballot measure 7A and those impacts to the EOTC budget. If you recall, there was some discussion about staff looking into options for Snowmass to use the funds that were coming out of their savings account. So it was 50% out of above the line, 50% from their savings account, and they wanted to see if there were other options for the use of those funds. So we have been working on that, and we're planning on coming back to you with some options on October 17th for that request. And then with the dynamic message sign, several decisions were made. As you'll recall, the reallocation of the $400,000 in construction funds, utilizing the butterfly design. I also went back to each of the jurisdictions with the visualizations of the 18 and 26-foot signs and the message lists and how those would be affected by the different size signs. As a result of those, we did land on the 18-foot sign, but we do need to come back and discuss some location issues. And then we did agree to standardize the name to Brush Creek Park and Ride. And I did actually notice on my commute in that the RAFTA buses all say Brush Creek Park and Ride now, so they've taken Intercept off their marquees. And then we also made a decision, or you all made a decision, to pursue the mid-station restroom location for the Brush Creek Park and Ride. And as you'll see in the packet, all of the renderings and the site plans, those are all based around that decision to have it at that location. And then the EOTC retreat has been set for August 7th. And then you had several updates, one from the town of Snowmass on their transit center, and then several from myself on HOV lane enforcement, the Aspen Country and subsidized rides, and the X Games revenues versus costs. Next, before I move on, did I miss anything there in those decisions or have anything misstated? Corrections?
Just a question. The city of Aspen only had 2 representatives there, and we made these decisions. Did they have to reaffirm the decisions at their city council meeting?
They don't officially, because it's a recommending body. A quorum isn't necessary at EOTC to move forward, with the one exception to being budget items. So those do need to go back. So I did need to go back to them for the reallocation of the $400,000, but that's the only point that's required.
Have they since agreed to that? Or
Reallocating the
Yeah.
construction funding? Yes.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. And then this is, sorry, there's a lot on this slide. Trying to sum up the state legislation changes. Just real briefly, because I know you've already heard a lot of this, it does primarily impact or can significantly impact the EOTC as a result of the structure of the use funds versus the sales tax. And a lot of construction funding, as you know, funds the use tax currently, and 100% of that half-cent goes to the EOTC. As a result of the changes, a lot of those construction funding, construction materials will now pay sales tax instead of use tax, which puts it into a different bucket for the EOTC. And the internet sales, I think this is a good thing overall, will be taxed at the local rate, which will also increase general sales tax revenue. Motor vehicle use tax will remain unchanged, so that will continue to come in to the EOTC as it does today. But overall, we are expecting use tax to decline while sales tax would increase. And then this is my attempt to make it visual. So we've got the blue boxes are the sales and use tax coming in, and then the decrease in use tax, increase in sales tax, and then the breakout of the EOTC and RAFTA funding for the sales tax at about 19% and 81%. So that, just so you know, that breakout between the 19 and 81%, that was done by ballot measure in 2004. So that's not an easy thing to adjust. It would need to go back to the voters to change that. but 100% of the use tax does come back. So overall, we are looking at a net revenue decrease to fund. This is just a list of funding measures that are in the enabling legislation ballot and the current IGA from 1993. Projecting out with the ballpark estimates that we have so far, I anticipate that we'll be okay through 2023, but as the finance director explained, that we won't see hard numbers until August because this went into effect June 1. So we're going to continue to monitor those and come back to you with any suggestions or anything that we might need to adjust in October when we've got a couple months of data to look at. So that's all I've got. Were there any more questions you had on the
No, I
funding
think
piece?
that's what we're looking at, and we're just waiting to see the numbers.
Yeah.
Do you have a kind of a ballpark figure for the expected decrease in the revenue?
You know, it's so, we just don't have a solid figure right now. And I think that we really need to get a couple months of data under our belt before we know for sure. All we can really tell right now is that we do expect it to be a
Will be
decrease.
some decrease.
Yeah.
Guesses.
You know, barring a recession or something, some unforeseen change, I see that we'll be able to meet obligations through 2023, but the budget itself will become a lot tighter than it has been in the past.
Okay. Well, I'm sure you'll keep us up to date on that as we go into the future meetings.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that I expect that this will could be more a significant part of the October conversation of budget time. Hopefully it's not a big piece, but we'll definitely touch base on it then.
Yeah, is it, I don't know, fair to say, just based on looking at this, even if the pot of money is the same, the control over that will shrink from EOTC to RAFTA, and then we would have to have member conversations among the EOTC about what that means in terms of additional revenue or sales tax dedication or
Absolutely, yeah.
something.
Yeah, we'd expect the sales tax pot to grow, which has different decision-making authority around it, and the use tax pot to decrease, which of course is controlled by the EOTC. And of course, we've speculated on numbers, and that's why we're not ready to probably publicly speculate on those numbers, which is why we're kind of being reticent on throwing anything out there right now, and until we get some real runs, and we'll hopefully be back to you. I think August was it August or September? Now I'm trying to remember.
August for June numbers.
Yeah, so we should have our first run of real numbers in August for June, which is the first full month of implementation. Then we can see how close our speculation is and probably give you a better guess publicly then.
And I guess when we get into the budget discussions this fall, then we'll have all those projections also.
Correct.
And with a little bit, a few more months behind it to
Yeah.
back up the figures.
Yep.
Then we also had like the record skier numbers this last winter, so the sales tax revenue, I think, should be way ahead of previous years too.
Well, and that's probably the other part of the hesitation you're hearing from staff is we're starting to see some increases in sales tax. But Department of Revenue is still putting their system in place that attributes those revenues to the online sales versus the construction sales. So we don't have real data to work with to know what is the bump because we had a fantastic snow year and a lot of visitors, what's being driven by this policy change. So hopefully by August, we'll be able to start to really project those out with a little more confidence for the board.
Okay.
So this was just to let you know that we're looking at it, this is what we're expecting, and that we'll be back with more information, essentially. Moving on to the Brush Creek Park and Ride and the flap grant improvements. As I mentioned, in March, did decide on the mid-station. Since then, we did hold a public open house at CMC with the Federal Highways Administration and design staff present there. We had a public opinion survey that got 80 responses, which I think was actually pretty good. It was open for 3 weeks. And I think we got some good good feedback, good suggestions, and it was a good way to get the pulse of, does the public generally feel like we're moving in the right direction here to help improve transit ridership. And we're also moving toward the 30% plans. So at the meeting on Thursday, we will have a representative from Federal Highways Administration who's administering the FLAP grant for us out of Lakewood. He'll be present to be able to explain more about the program and the financing and that kind of thing if you have any questions there. We'll also have the engineering and design team present as well. So they're the ones who put together the cost estimates and the 30% plan. So if you have any of those detailed questions, they will be able to field those. And that's part of the reason why my memo for this was a little bit more lengthy and detailed than it may normally be. I wanted you to be prepared to be able to ask those questions and take advantage of them being around the table. So in terms of actions that we're looking at, we've got I guess 6 main ones. The first one being funding reallocation. This is reallocating $70,000 of the matching fund, so it's not increasing the obligation to the grant. It's simply moving it from 2020 to 2019. As we've learned more about how the grant is administered, we understand that they will be invoicing us as they get billed by the consulting team for the design. So we get invoiced for that proportionate share and expect this year to be about $70,000. The second one down is the special events and information booth area. So that's trying to get a feel from the committee as to whether you'd like to keep that area open, covered, or partially enclosed. If you may recall from the mid-station design, one of the benefits of that is it did have this area that could be used as sort of a flex space that could be used for event registration. People could put up tents for those types of special events, or we could enclose it if we wanted to be a more formal, like information booth. So there were some options there. But generally, for the budget, the open option appears to be within the budget. So the other ones would require additional funding from the EOTC. So we're trying to get some direction there from the committee, and then from snowmelt, again. Think that there's some benefits to doing it. We've been guiding the consultant team to move toward designing for a snowmelt system, but want to make sure that everyone feels as though that's the correct path, because it is a fairly large energy consuming
They'd
item.
have to be connected to solar for me to support that.
And that's a piece that I think that's worth keeping in the back of your mind for the design team. We've
I
been
noticed for the next, but
yeah.
with what we're doing with our energy code and how we're trying to get people that want snowmelt on their own property to use renewables, I think we'd have to set the example on that.
Right, and that's part of the
Makes
reason.
sense too, so.
So we have considered, just to fill you in a little bit, we have considered electric. RAFTA has had issues with their electric snowmelt systems, so we've been looking at the natural gas and glycol, which obviously you can't offset with solar. The only other real option is geothermal, but the expense of that could be quite substantial. So that's part of the reason why we're looking to get your feedback on that.
Got great solar access right there. I mean,
We do.
What are the issues they've had with their electric?
The issues, from what I understand, have been the interface between the electric and the concrete, and has caused the concrete to splinter and crack. So they've had to go in and replace a lot of the concrete.
I think that's something that could be fixed because people seem to be doing it at their houses without those problems. So maybe we should learn from the private sector on that one.
Yeah. So that's some of the background conversation there, and the reason why we're looking for that direction. The next one, I think, segues nicely into the solar panels. Again, we've been steering the design team to fit as many solar panels as they can on the roof of the new structure. So we're not looking at the existing RAFTA structure, just the new structures. There's additional cost. We can offset some of that cost with CORE and Holy Cross grants. But there are visual impacts. So we're, again, looking for some of that direction in terms of should we continue to push this with the design team. And then they have brought up options for some ground-mounted small clusters. And again, would like to get some direction on whether you think we should be pursuing that. Sustainability, we've been guiding the design team to use LEED principles, but not necessarily go for a LEED certification because of the expense. So again, want to make sure that trying to gauge how important the certification is versus having or implementing the lead principles. And then with security, obviously this is a very important issue. We'll be back to you with more lighting details at 70% plans. Lighting is one of those issues that we've discussed before where it's very important for security, but can have negative impacts to adjacent property owners. We're trying to run that fine line.
Just a little history on that. We've had done lighting changes a couple of times out there, keeping in mind that you need them for security and public safety, but because of the Brush Creek Homeowners Association. So we went through rounds of downlighting, downlighting, downlighting. So I don't want us to have to go through that whole process again. It'd be nice if we could kind of get it right the first time, which I think should be part of that discussion.
That is what we're looking for, and that's
It
what
was
I've heard
big.
from the adjacent property owners as
Yeah,
well.
it was big.
Is that it's very important to them.
Yeah, I can just picture that being a huge neighborhood issue. All the people at Brush Creek Village looking down on it, and if it looks like a shopping mall or something from too much lighting there, then that would have some bad neighborhood feedback, I'm sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And that showed up, like I said, in the neighborhood meetings and in the survey as probably the number one issue. So we're not quite to the point to bring you cut sheets for lights and that kind of thing, but I think that would be appropriate more at 70% and 95% to make sure we're on the right path there. Right now, we're looking at cameras and where should we be incorporating cameras and call boxes. So I think that there's some potential there with the call boxes out in the parking lot area, and then you might have seen the memo, staff recommendation of cameras around the restroom facility. RAFTA currently has cameras in their transit area. So that's what we're looking at for feedback from you all on Thursday.
I do have I'm going back to moving the kiosk again.
Okay.
What is the need to do it now rather than wait till we have because I can just see it, and then we're gonna have construction out there, we're gonna have the kiosk, so then we're gonna have increased traffic coming and going, and I don't know, there was no purpose, or there's no reason given for why they're gonna move it now before the other process has started.
The reason is primarily they saw an opportunity to move it sooner. The city of Aspen did, and from a staff perspective, there are the potential traffic impacts where you have both of those happening at the same time. From my perspective, it's actually I see it as a benefit because we're able to analyze what the impacts of that kiosk are and how people generally move through there before we're actually laying concrete. So then we can analyze it through the summer and make sure that it is actually functioning before we've put in that expense.
But we won't really have a layout determined when they put it out there, so what are we really gaining? I just don't see an opportunity. I don't see that as a good reason to move it before. I mean, it'll be there during the construction process, which is just going to make it more of a headache for people to pull in and pull out and get their HOV parking permits and their other parking permits. So I'm not sold on moving it to begin with, because I think we're just going to increase traffic coming and going from an already congested intersection, and to try and resolve the traffic congestion where it is now, what are we doing by moving it to someplace that's going to possibly create another traffic congestion issue? And it's a benefit to the people, and I don't think people are going to pull in there necessarily get out of their cars. They're going to pull in there to get their HOV parking permits, and we're just going to have an increase. So I'm going to be on the losing end of this one. I just think because the city saw an opportunity doesn't, to me, justify a reason. And I'll bring it up at the meeting.
And I'm sorry, I don't recall exactly what the reasoning was behind that, but I can follow up on that.
Yeah, that'd be great. I want it. Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks.
I do think, sorry, Steve, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead, Kelly.
No, I was just gonna say, I don't know if this is gonna help appease Patty. David and team are gonna have to figure out how to manage the impacts of traffic using the park and ride while construction is going underway as well. So this is sort of falls under that same category of dealing with that, with, to me, the added benefit of being able to know, do we need to redesign the kiosk location to make it best for the end? and having data to rely on to know that.
Right, but the problem is it's going to still be the same alignment we have now. So it's not really going to show you what the traffic flow is going to be then, because we're not changing that now. We're changing it during construction. So just moving it from one corner to the other with the same parking setup and the same, islands and flow of traffic isn't really going to show us anything, because we're redesigning all of that. So I
It
don't.
can be flexible during the course of that.
Yeah, but they're not changing the actual physical layout of the parking lot. So by moving it, so in other words, how are they really going to find out what it's going to look like in the end when they're just moving it around in the same box that exists now?
Right, but that box is gonna have different flows.
That's what I mean,
And different
after the
assignments
fact.
of parking.
After the fact. So by putting it out there now, what are we learning?
Now,
I don't get it.
I think the intent, and correct me if I'm wrong, David, is to try and have the kiosk function roughly as is intended under the proposed design. And
That they're
so-
putting it on rollers to move it around.
So the
If
flow in and out, we're anticipating to delineate with boulders, so that people would have to functionally go in and out the same way it
So you're
would.
going to create a different box than exists now to try and simulate what it would be like when the kiosk is there. Not
Correct.
just moving it around in the existing.
Yeah, we're not just going to push it around the asphalt.
That's what I like. It doesn't really make sense to me unless we're actually changing the physical structure of the flow of traffic.
No, the intent was to use temporary
Okay, that's not put in here.
traffic calming devices like boulders that would mimic that
Got a lot of
flow.
boulders out
and then
there.
if you see that, because it's kind of a almost like a roundabout, right? You go
It's
around
like a
it.
half
What do you call
lollipop,
it?
if that works.
Lollipop. I don't know.
Making
We're
that
gonna
up
have to
as I
come
go
up
on.
with a better.
A half what?
Well, our metaphors aren't good
It's
right
not
now.
gonna be a roundabout, Patty, don't worry.
Yeah, but
I don't like those either. No, half lollipop, did they say?
yeah, it gives a chance, I think, to David's point, to see, do you have more backups?
Right.
Does that half
Right.
lollipop configuration?
So see, that
make
wasn't
those?
clear. It was like we were
Okay.
moving it around in the same
Make that clear in
configuration.
the-
The other thing is, and Kelly's right, they're going to have to manage the flow of traffic during construction, but this is only adding to the amount of traffic if we move the kiosk there now, rather than figure out where we're going to put it. It just doesn't make sense to me to be moving it now. I'm just going to leave it at that. It doesn't make sense to me moving it at all, but I'm going to leave it at that.
So a couple of thoughts for the EOTC meeting. One would be to have a good map showing the traffic flow for the kiosk where it's proposed.
It's
Also then the timeline of where, we could have the kiosk there way sooner than we're actually gonna be doing
Yeah,
some major
They're planning
construction.
on
Doing this
moving
summer.
it in July, yeah, so in another month.
Yeah, so I think having the timeline and the map to help, just in the discussion on
And they better
Thursday.
let the public know they're moving it in July, so people
Yes.
get used to. They're gonna be really pissed off if they go to the airport and there's nothing there, and they have to come back to get their HOV permits.
They can always go and park like everybody else too, without the
They can't afford it.
carpool permit.
They can't afford to park in town. Are you kidding me? How
Do
expensive
they
it
sell
is?
those at the parking here?
They don't. I understood that.
They used to.
But they don't anymore.
When are we gonna have the sign put up? Will that be
The dynamic message sign?
after, that's gonna be after we have the kiosk moved, right? It would be
That's gonna
nice
be
to
next
have
year.
this,
So
nice to have the sign in place so we could say,
I,
parking kiosk is now, turn left at the
Yes.
light for the parking kiosk.
We could do a
it won't
temporary.
be up there, it won't be up in time, which is actually my next slide.
It'll
If
be
we're-
next year.
Yeah, so at this point, assuming that we can come to an agreement on the location this Thursday, and we can then move it out to bid and start permitting, we're looking at installation when the ground thaws in 2020.
Let's go back to that first
Did
point.
we have any other?
Yeah, that was something
on
that
the
I think we
location.
were hoping to have some consensus from the Board of Commissioners before the meeting as to the location, so we weren't, just having the discussion amongst ourselves in the midst of the EOTC meeting. And,
Well, the recommendation is to have it the one closest to Brush Creek, the 1 mile away from Brush Creek,
Where
That
it
remains
was-
the staff
which
recommendation.
is after the Smith Hill Road intersection.
That would be, if you're going up Valley, you would hit the sign before
Smith Hill.
Smith Hill.
Or Smith Hill?
Yeah. So there's, in terms of the safety, it's important that you read the sign and then come to the intersection as opposed to come to the intersection and still be reading the sign. So that's part of the reason to put it beforehand.
And
So that is-
the other option for the city was right after the Wildcat.
Right, so that is about 2.2 miles prior to the Brush Creek Road intersection. Those are the only two intersections that engineering team feels are safe. So they meet site distance and they have adequate safety. So then the differentiating features are the utilization of each location and how well do they perform. And it's staff's opinion that the 1 mile would perform much better than the 2.2. It's just
The one that
too
was
far away.
originally selected.
The 1 mile is the one that was originally selected,
yeah.
yeah.
And the city was concerned about view plane to Cozy Point, even though it's going to affect the view plane in either place. But I think we should, I like leaving it where it was first planned. And if we eliminate that one sign that George said, there's 2 HOV lane signs, maybe we can use that to get the city to, we're going to take down a sign if we add this here, so. Trying to look at some bait there to barter
Yeah.
with.
Has the city come to an agreement or a decision on this, or?
Not that I know of. I'm meeting with them after this meeting.
Oh, great.
Where does the rest of the, where do you guys feel?
We supported it when it was recommended the first time.
Yeah,
I don't-
that's what I thought.
Haven't changed.
Yeah, I mean, I'm in favor of having the one closer. And 2 miles away, people are gonna, some
They're gonna
people will
forget.
forget what the sign said in that length of time.
Right. And
They'll
if you think about
forget.
driving down most interstates, you see the directional sign or the exit sign is 1 mile prior to. And that's the same thinking as the placement of this sign.
Yeah, I'd like it to work to its
It would be
optimal.
preferable if it were.
Yeah,
We would like it to work.
optimal function if we're gonna add a big sign somewhere.
That's a good point.
Is there anything else on the dynamic message sign?
I'm good with that.
The only other items that'll be on the agenda, we've got the EOTC retreat update, so I'll be there with the facilitator, Stephanie Zaza. We have set a date, as you're aware, August 7th, 8:15 to 3 at the Aspen Institute. Stephanie will go over the draft agenda that we have for the retreat at that time. And then Dave Peckler will give you an update on the Snowmass Village Transit Center. Their council met on that last evening, so they're progressing with their design. And then Dave Johnson will give you an update on the Rafter Retreat, which happened last Thursday, and updates with ballot measure 7A and where they are with those obligations.
And the meeting is here this Thursday,
Yep,
and we are hosting, right?
you are, yep. And there will be jour de fête finger foods, from what I understand.
Yes, we are the best when we host.
Do we need to give you feedback upon the special events design proposals now? Is that helpful?
For
what?
the,
The
Brush
flap, I'm going backwards, yeah, for the Brush Creek Park.
I mean, if
The
they wanted to
cat
put
talks,
up an
yeah.
area that they could put up tents or have an enclosed
Well,
space. or-
there was 3 design options of an open area, which would allow for tables and such, and then or partially enclosed, or,
Similar to the sign, it it might be good for you guys if there are questions about those to just kind of see where the board stands going into the meeting.
Let's put it in the kiosk. And move it around on rollers.
and the staff recommendation is for the open design with flexibility for future enclosure if desired, is that correct?
that is correct, yeah.
One question I had,
Makes
which
sense.
we didn't really cover, was the potential electric vehicle charging stations and laying the conduit in the right places so we don't have to tear the parking lot up later.
Right.
And I see on the one map, it has it over on the down valley side of the first row is the only place I see. And is that, you kind of indicated like at the back of the lot, is that what
So
I'm thinking of?
I've been working with the engineers to basically place conduit any place where we could put a charger. So we're looking at, because right now it's very inexpensive to place the conduit. And then we can more easily add the charging stations as market demands require.
We should plan ahead on that.
Yeah, the expense is astronomically cheaper at this point. So
Chargers and regular chargers? Are we looking at quick chargers?
right now just the conduit, and then upgrading the transformers to be able to provide power to both bus charging, some fast chargers, and predominantly level 2 chargers, because we're finding that most people spend about 8 to 10 hours in the lot, which suits the level 2 charging pretty well. So we are looking, the area that you pointed out, we are looking at placing conduit there. Essentially, every parking space that has a curb next to it, all the way around, is where we're looking at placing conduit. And I've got a visualization with the presentation on Thursday that shows that.
Can we connect that to solar at some point
So
in the
any,
future?
okay, so we're by the Kiss and Ride platform. Now, my thought is in 20 years, all the cars might be electric and every parking space is gonna wanna have a charging station there. Could we lay way more conduit now than we think we're even gonna need?
I think-
Anticipating that electric cars are gonna take over the whole.
Well, I
whole
think
thing.
in 20 years, we'd probably have to be doing some asphalt and cement replacement, so we could gear it up at that time.
The only other thing is if everybody goes to hydrogen fuel cell vehicles instead of electric vehicles,
Yeah, you can only plan so much.
then,
Right now, it looks like the market trends are toward electric, and we've got an opportunity now to basically lay several hundred feet of conduit for less than $10,000, which is,
And in the future, we'd have to be charging for people to charge there because we wouldn't be able to afford the power for all of those
Yeah,
if they were
yeah,
all
I
electric.
agree.
So, but I think within 20 years, we'd probably have to do some upgrade on the asphalt, the pavement, and at that point, we could probably lay more conduit.
and I did talk to some experts in the field from Core and the state energy office about that, and they basically said that we're not to the point now where we've got that level of demand, or really the chargers that make sense to place in the middle of those spaces. They're not compact enough. So I think that we may end up going down that road at some point, but at this, right now we're looking at, I want to say it's about 40 to 50 spaces that would be,
That's huge.
yeah, that would be able to easily be converted into an EV charging space. So that seemed workable at this point.
Especially if we look at doing some of the quick charge, the fast charge for people who are driving through.
And in terms of looking into the future, the energy density on the batteries is probably, the daytime charging may or may not be as important in the future.
They may all have
It's
solar
really
units
hard.
on their cars and not have to be worried about charging stations.
It's possible.
David, is that funding separate from the FLAP grant to pay for that conduit?
The conduit would be
separate?
paid for within the FLAP grant.
Okay.
So
great.
any chargers, there's no actual physical chargers within the FLAP grant.
Sure.
And talking to the energy office and Core, it's about a 6-month lead time. So when we're about 6 months out from actually opening this all up, I'm planning on moving forward with grants to actually place some chargers out there.
Great.
I bet Brian Pettit is really happy that you're here with us now, isn't he? Looking at all the work you've been doing, I'm thinking Brian is probably going, "Phew, thank God we have Dave." And we appreciate that too.
Do we want to chat about the open versus
I think the
enclosed?
staff's recommendation makes sense. It gives us the opportunity to make tweaks in the future if we decide to.
And just one note on the open and covered versus enclosed. You may notice the cost difference between the open is about $640-some thousand was the cost estimate to cover it. That is covering that can easily be enclosed at any point in the future, so you don't need to modify that overhang. So that's part of the reason why that cost is a little bit higher. It also anticipates that if we were going to put a covering, that it would be strong enough to be able to support solar panels on top.
Thank you.
So that was something that came up yesterday with Snowmast, was why that cost was so great, and just wanted to pass that along.
Okay. So when we're, just to be clear, when we're looking at these renderings, open just, I don't know if we have, the one that's labeled open actually looks like a partially enclosed with solar. So I just want to be clear if that's
What it looks
what
like.
that's representing.
Okay, now I'm concerned that I mislabeled something.
I can show it to you, and we
There
can get it
is-
cleaned up. But yeah, anyway, so because when we're talking about the solar, I'm just starting to get a visual representation of how much solar. And so if that is dependent on whether we decide on an open versus a partially enclosed or not, is
There,
what I want to
and
understand.
there's another thing with the solar we need to be cognizant of too, is it's in the flight path. And so we need to make sure we have, FAA, even though there was a proposal for one not too far from there, and the FAA seemed to be okay with that, but this one is even more direct into the flight path.
Right.
Yeah, a lot of it depends on the materials. and
Right,
such
right, just
they're
something to
using.
keep in mind when we're starting to do. And I don't know if we still have to do abrogation easements for any changes we make within the corridor, the flight path corridor.
Can't remember if they extend down that far or not.
No, they used to extend all the way down to like Pick and Iron.
Oh, really? Okay.
So it's just
can
another
take a
thing,
look at
heads
that.
up.
And that is part of the reason we're looking for the direction before we
Yeah.
expend a lot of energy looking into a lot of these
Yeah.
requirements, knowing that it's a direction you want to go.
I'm going to show you my question.
Okay.
Okay, so we have the enclosed, and then this is open, and I think you might mean it to be partially enclosed.
Yeah, that is mislabeled.
But
Good catch,
so-
Kelly.
Yeah, this one should be enclosed, or this one should be covered, that's labeled open.
okay.
And then, Steve, you lost your pages.
Sorry, Steve.
You could just set them there, I'll
Sorry
pick them up later.
Yeah, you don't get to
Because I
make it.
want to take them to the EOTC.
Yeah, I've got my packet ready for the OTC meeting.
Yeah, I'm torn on the idea. I mean, I think having something with at least a roof over it would be nice, because if it's a really hot day, you can have the shade. If it's raining or snowing, at least you're getting some protection.
And that is absolutely the benefit. There is,
Yeah.
something to keep in mind is that there is still an overhang with the design of the restroom facility now. So we're not totally coverless if we don't go with the covered option. And that in any bus, riders still have the shelter at the bus stop.
Coverless, I like that.
But then
I'd cover
the other
this.
consideration is, if we didn't build anything there now, just left it open, that leaves a clean slate for perhaps doing a nicer facility that's more on the line of the town park station or something, which is, a pretty deluxe facility, but maybe that's the way the community would want to go in a few years down the road.
Yep, absolutely. Yep.
So those are the things we'll have to consider on Thursday. Okay, anything else, David?
I don't have anything more.
Any more questions? We can
We
bring
are
anything
so
up on
prepared for Thursday.
Thursday. Yep.
No, then Thursday we can still have, we still have discussion time, so.
In terms of attendance, you three are going to be there. I understand George is the only one that's not going to be in attendance.
We're planning on seeing Greg, but
Correct.
he may get caught up in testifying in Washington DC.
When is Greg due back into?
We don't know.
I think Wednesday night.
Yeah, it's supposed to be Wednesday night. I understand maybe the testimony either got moved or canceled.
There was no hearing scheduled.
Okay. We have the snowplows ready to clear the runway so we can allow him to land.
This may be a year where we need them in June. or July. We'll see.
And yes, David, barring arrival of baby curry, I will be here.
And I hate to tell you, but she would rather not be there and be having that baby.
Okay, thank you, David. We'll see you on Thursday.
It's back to you before I forget.
Cool, thank you so much.
Okay, looking at continuing on with our future agendas.
Yeah,
What do you have, John?
Thanks, Steve. Got a few things for you today. First, in the near future, just a reminder that we do have our site visit to Phillips today. There will be a van out front at 2:45, and we plan on starting the tour at Phillips at 3:15.
At the water side.
At the water side, that's right. We're going to start there, and then we're going to move around to the other side. We do have some walks planned. We'll see how much we're doing from the van and how much we're walking around.
And then we're meeting,
across
I'm meeting
the-
you at the Intercept lot. You're driving
I
your
was
car.
going to say, we're going to have a stop at the Intercept lot on the way down and on the way back for whoever wants one.
To catch the bus or pick up a car. And the public, we have a public, some time set aside for public to ask questions at
So we have
4:20 or something?
3:30. If there are residents present, we had time set aside where all present board members could hear questions or comments.
Okay.
Okay. Couple of scheduling snafus. First, our joint meeting with the town of Basalt on June 25th. We had a communication breakdown internally, and our Whitewater Park consultants are not available on that date. And so, yeah, we talked to Basalt, and we thought it best to reschedule to a time when we could talk about the Whitewater Park, since that was one of the main reasons for getting together. We've got right now July 2nd, August 13th, and August 27th to Basalt as opportunities for us to do the joint meeting. We're waiting to hear back from them. So apologize, that will change next week, but it will buy you a little bit of time. And then there was some confusion, I guess, last week around the APSHA board. So I just
you.
want to talk to you guys about that and give any mea culpas that I need to.
It was really a question that George brought up as to who made the decision, wasn't it?
Yeah, there was a lack of clarity on how it was decided that we would all 10 interview rather than decide if a
5 and
small
5.
subset or
Yeah, and
5 and 5.
I'll apologize if that wasn't clear. That's definitely on my end. I think the intent in setting the joint meeting on July 9th, the council was going to be doing interviews at that time anyway for all of their boards, and we had a joint meeting scheduled. When we scheduled the joint meeting and said, I must not have been clear that the intent was for that to be time to interview candidates and time for all of you to discuss those interviews after interviewing candidates, with the idea being we'd have a date certain that we could identify in our advertisements for candidates to be available, because we have the August 1st start date, so we have a very limited window in which to get applicants in, interview them, make selections, and have an APSHA board
Right.
for August. So that decision, I guess, if it was not informed consent, and it appears that there's confusion, so I'll need to own that.
Yeah, George's concern wasn't that we were gonna do it all at one time. It was who made the decision to do it all at one time.
Well,
That was his
if that was the conversation that I had with Sarah, and that I thought I had relayed to you guys, but if not, I apologize. That was
I
always
thought
the
we'd had
intent.
some discussion about it, but
Yeah, that was always the intent of the joint meeting, was that we had interviewed candidates and that we wanted to establish a date so we could include it in our advertisement. So if that was not clear, well, I guess I'll say it was not clear. If there's confusion about it, I apologize. That's on me.
But we're still moving ahead on the 9th.
I would recommend it. Otherwise, we're not going to have an APSHA board for the August meeting.
My only concern is if that's very intimidating for potential applicants
Yeah.
to deter them from applying. I hope not.
We have
Might
had
want to get it all over with at one time, though.
Yeah,
we've had one
there are
applicant
definitely
that,
pros and cons.
at this point, but that's not unusual.
Had
that-
one applicant?
We've had one applicant, but they usually come in closer to the deadline. It's like job applications.
Yeah.
They all come in at the
And
end.
drumming up some
Have,
interest.
and have we heard anything from the current board members? Do you know? No?
Without
applicant was one of
disclosing
them?
who, one applicant is from
I
the
think
current.
I know. Good.
And then, it would be good, and I'd encourage council members or board members, if you have folks who are interested in serving that you think would be good, I'd encourage you to talk to them and have them apply.
I would also like to do something to honor the current board before the end of July. We can think about what would be appropriate.
Yeah, we can come up with something. I can talk to Sarah about that. So,
And then on that note, so if we're going into future agendas at some point, I think we need to have a resolution to appoint our members as well.
yeah, that is, we actually were just talking about that this morning, to schedule a little bit of time at a work session when we have the full board, and then get on a regular meeting. We may even schedule that for next week. I think that's going to be a quick conversation.
Great.
Yeah, I noticed on the city of Aspen had just their appointments to all their different boards, that they had them laid out, and they had 2 people assigned to APSHA already at this point, and I don't know whether that was their official, like they made that decision.
For their own 2 city council
With
members?
Rachel being one of the 2, and now I can't remember.
Board?
I
think it was Skippy.
I had heard Rachel and Skippy.
Skippy, I think it
were the
was,
2.
yeah.
We don't know who's,
And Skippy's
Regular.
name was listed first, but who the voting member is, I'm not sure. They might have been doing it alphabetically.
then Rachel would have been first and Skippy would have been, by
Oh,
last
the
names.
name.
Going, how did he put S in front of R? He's a school teacher. He should know better.
And that's all I had on future agendas.
Okay.
Unless you-
I have,
Patty.
of course.
Patty, the floor is yours.
Of course. Don't forget, on the 25th, I will try and be here. John, you're going to be attending the ACRA meeting with me, right?
That's correct. We're going to be presenting on
So
the
we can maybe
salt
sneak
project.
out, because we have exec session that starts at 10 that day. And then on the 26th, is it okay if we move the GMQS item, which is number 19, at the end of our meeting? Could we move that before the ski company land use?
And what date was that again? I'm
The
sorry.
26th,
26.
next week. That would be terrific.
We all know why.
So then I can go upstairs and watch you guys during the ski company with my feet up on the desk. And that's all I have.
I have a couple
Do you have anything, Kelly?
topics. Since we are canceling our meeting with BOCC, I am wondering if we could use that time to circle with Kara and Cindy on climate change policy prior to our attendance at the CC4CA retreat next Thursday.
So that would be Tuesday afternoon.
'Cause there is a policy, there's a draft policy statement from CC4CA that I think would be helpful for us to have alignment on prior to going to that meeting.
Are the 2 of you, who's going?
We're
You're
going, Cindy
Cindy going?
probably is not going. She had another obligation she thought she had to
Okay.
do. And
I
Greg's,
think Greg's gonna try to go.
Greg said initially
We've
he
noticed
wasn't
it,
going,
so.
but I'm not sure now.
What, is it possible we'll have three of you?
Yeah, it's noticed on our agendas.
It is noticed, okay.
We planned ahead on that one, John.
So maybe just for consideration.
Yeah, so next Tuesday, and it's the CC4CA climate change policy.
Yeah, their
Okay.
policy statement, yep.
I think that's a great idea, Kelly,
Gotta use
because
that
that's
time.
just 2 days before the retreat.
Yeah. It'll just be more effective at the retreat instead of having to say we have to come back. And then I was approached by someone for the I'm going to get this wrong, Aspen Community Foundation, about possibly coming before the board to do an update on their Cradle to Career initiative.
It's now called something different.
Pass that along.
Isn't it called something different? There's so many things going on in this valley with, it kind of reminds me of the mental health, when we had everybody trying to do mental health things and we weren't coordinating. And I think that's what's happening with childcare now. We have all these groups coming in and we're kind of not getting stretched thin, we're not getting it. So, but they call it,
Yeah, it's called, it's been rebranded, I know, and
it was Cradle to Career when John Bennett kicked it off with the Aspen Community Foundation.
right.
That's how it was presented to me.
Yeah, unless they're reviving it again, I don't know. But,
Anyway, I'm happy to find out
You
more
know,
information about it.
If you know who it
that,
is, too, we
yeah.
can touch base. The only thing is I'd remind the board, because of the Healthy Community Fund, where we have a process for nonprofits to approach for funding. Sometimes these are requests for funding, and we try and keep that all in that application process so it's transparent. And so maybe if you have a contact, I
Further
could
vet
reach
that.
out to them.
yeah, and
sure.
then we have to keep it open because then we might, the Western Slope Childcare, whatever that other group is. And then you have the Basalt Childcare Coalition. So, yeah. So, no.
Well, it's clear there's a lot of interest in the
Yeah,
topic.
there it
and
is.
Some opportunity to
We
organize.
can try and get it like we did with mental health and actually
Yeah.
get it to where we actually getting something done.
Yeah,
So, yeah, if I could get that information,
Sure.
I'll reach out
happy
and
to. Yeah.
figure out what it is.
Do we have a childcare meeting have you received anything? I'll let you know if I get something. Usually it
Yeah.
pops up on my calendar and I haven't seen it yet.
Thank you. I think that was it.
Oh,
Sorry.
no, this would be open discussion. I just don't want to forget it.
I know, I was just debating whether this was open discussion or not. You had a letter forwarded to you from
Youth Zone?
Youth Zone around a capital request, which is in a different profile than an operating request, because capital cannot be covered by the Healthy Community Fund. And so we've had requests like from Mind Springs come forward. I think it'd be appropriate, given the services provided in the county, to at least schedule time to talk about that request.
For 50,000, then we definitely need to have time to talk about it.
Yeah, so it'd be,
Was it 50,000 they're asking?
yeah, it's a request for 50,000. It's, what the board gave for the mental health hospital, basically, I think is kind of how that was keyed. So if the board is okay, we'll go ahead and schedule time for.
Did we have some kind of a numbers basis for that money we gave to Mind Springs?
It was basically.
Service?
Yeah, we had a number of residents served through M1 holds at the facility. And then it was also loosely based on where some of our neighboring counties were also contributing.
So we need to, because I know Garfield County pitched in a pretty good amount to Youth Zone, didn't they?
And I believe Eagle County is looking at it also. And so the request is definitely not out of line, given the percentage of folks served and the contributions from neighboring counties. but that'll be up to you guys.
Didn't they just get a building in Glenwood Springs? Who got the,
This is actually supporting the development in Glenwood Springs. It's administrative offices that provide services in the whole Roaring Fork Valley. So that's the ask, is to support some of what they had to, I think, finance
the old
out to
library or
complete that
something? There was some
project.
building.
Yeah, I know it was a Garfield County, I
Yeah.
believe it was a Garfield County building, maybe not, but it's.
Something, we need to get that info. I can't.
Yeah,
quite
well,
put the
they'd be
pieces.
happy to come in and do a presentation.
That's
So
what I
if
was
you're
gonna ask you
okay with
about.
it, well, yeah, I was debating whether that was a good discussion or
I
future
can take that off my
agendas
list
too.
now.
Okay, that's truly all I had then.
Okay, I guess is Gary and GR, are they coming in?
Oh,
on that?
sorry, Steve, I should have given you a heads up. We need a little bit more time on the numbers,
That's why
all the
Jason's probably
numbers
here.
were, is that why you're here? Jason, I'm sorry I did not get a hold of you too. We have a few numbers that still need to be worked through and analyzed on that. So it turns out they were not prepared.
There were
to
some
present
issues,
that
I
today.
think, with, I'm going to say upscaling, which is not a pun intended, of the rock scaling of the rock wall, the protection on that, and what was the best method to use to really ensure public safety.
Yeah, and I think there
fall.
are some other numbers too. They
that
wanted to
was one of
spend
the
a little
biggies.
bit more time digging into.
Once they got the
so,
engineers really on board.
Yeah,
I noticed that was on our agenda for next week and then pushed to July 10th, but not listed on the July 10th agenda.
yeah, we may not have gotten it on there.
Yeah.
So the only other thing I had for open discussion, I don't know if any of you have gotten outreach, but I think we're anticipating there will be some outreach as the Board of Health starts to bring forward their recommendations for,
Tobacco?
yeah, flavored tobacco and T21 and those sorts of things. Certainly, I think our city of Aspen experienced that, as did Snowmass. We are happy to either get you the talking points that the Board of Health is working on, or any of those questions from concerned parties could be forwarded on to the health department.
What
So,
I'd like to know on the county side is, who sells it in the county? Are we affecting one business, or are we affecting two?
I want to say it was upwards of,
Three?
I think it was more, yeah. We do have that number. I don't want to throw a number out because I may be remembering the wrong one. But we can
Because
definitely.
the city looked at a partial, yeah, I mean, I followed some of the city's discussion, and then they went with the full ban, didn't they?
They did.
Interesting.
So I would just anticipate you may start to get outreach as the conversation, really starts to elevate with the Board of Health making recommendations to the Board of County Commissioners,
Can I ask
and
a real quick?
particularly the tobacco industry.
Can
has
I
been
ask a real
reaching out.
quick question since we have time? Did that affect like menthol cigarettes too?
Yes. That's considered
That's-
flavored.
Yeah, that's interesting because menthol's been out there forever, way before strawberry and blueberry, that's for sure.
Oh, don't you remember the candy cigarettes as a kid?
Oh, yeah. That was, yeah, we loved those. And that, they weren't minty though. Maybe that's why I didn't like them that much. Yeah, I think it's going to be an interesting discussion.
That's all I had for open discussion.
So I had forwarded the letter to you. It was from Jeanette Jones and her husband about they received notice from their trash hauling company that their rates are gonna double because they'll be picking up two
Oh,
times
yeah.
a week, one for the recycling and one for their regular trash. And I sort of think we're probably gonna be hearing a lot from the public about their trash hauling rates going up, like skyrocketing from what they're used to paying. And I'd like to dig into this a little bit and look for some, first of all, sort of fact
We
finding.
didn't think that was supposed to happen.
Well, we were told that they anticipated that people could use a smaller container, so then they would pay less for that, for the trash.
So we didn't regulate specifically price, and so what the haulers are choosing to do is really the hauler's choice within the market. You're also correct, Steve, that we did require that there be tiers so that
Pay as you throw?
you
or
could,
it's a
yeah,
tr-
pay
throw?
as you throw, that you could select a smaller container for a smaller price, assuming that you're diverting or recycling more materials. There's also the opportunity to apply for an exemption for folks that have a specific reason, either they're not served or what have you, they need to
recycling?
go back. Yeah. So there are options out there. We could certainly have Kathy come in and talk about, but we did not regulate on price. So this is really the haulers may be to a certain degree increasing their prices as a result, and I suspect this will probably work out as there's competition within the market.
Yeah, and I think, thinking creatively about it, in Bob and Jeanette's case, they live at Gateway Subdivision. Maybe there could be a community dumpster and recycling dumpster or something that they could have a big truck come.
That'd be up to their
and have
HOA.
a joint thing, like in lots of HOAs and whatnot. Might be a solution there possibly, where they could have the service offered, but it would be at a lower cost for each one of them if they had a community facility.
Yeah.
So
and that-
those kind of things would be on a case-by-case basis. People could maybe come up with other solutions.
And that would probably be up as
Up to
as
their-
Patty said, for an HOA or such to come up with that type of option and talk to the members about and bid it out and see if it really is an advantage.
So,
So anticipate we're probably all of us maybe be hearing from constituents.
just have to wonder how they recycled
Receive their bill
before.
and are gonna be complaining to us about it.
Some of a lot of folks either were not recycling.
That's what I'm saying, they weren't recycling
And
before.
so maybe didn't have that cost, or were using drop-off sites, which we've been moving away from.
Right.
And those were heavily subsidized through landfill tip fees.
And speaking of that, it's my understanding the city of Aspen has come to a decision on the recycling center.
I read probably the same article you did, but I do not know the details. I don't know if they're talking about doing it as it is now. I think that was the initial decision as I read it, but they're also looking at maybe promoting some alternative streams and such. So I will need to get together
Yeah,
with my
it'd
counterpart
be interesting.
and find out more about that.
Exciting if they're actually moving in the right direction.
Yeah, and they may still be approaching us in the future too about partnership. I don't know. We had put that on the table, quite a while back, and
Because August is the end of the contract, right?
August is the end of the contract, so they'd be picking up in August is what I read. And I have not really had a conversation about the details, or I have kept open in my discussions with city staff that we've always been willing to partner on these projects. We just need to know what that partnership looks like.
Great.
Okay.
I don't
Any
think-
other open discussion items from anybody?
Don't think I do.
So, okay, we have board reports, and that's all we have left today.
Northwest
So
Cog.
Patty, why don't you do yours first?
Northwest Cog had a great meeting over in Breckenridge, and it snowed, of course. It was cold in Breckenridge. It was a good turnout. We also combined it with the broadband meeting, so we heard from other jurisdictions about their broadband efforts. It was really informative. It was a really good meeting. And that it's nice to know that DOLA has funded Nate
Wallowitz.
Wallowitz. Wallowitz is the guy off of the
W
Big
is
Bang
what
Theory, I
you can
think.
call him.
Anyway, they've continued to fund him to be and manage this. He's sought after across the state. He's really great in this capacity. So we still have him running, the programs. Talked about Thor, the program that kind of we aren't in part of Thor because we were ahead of the curve on that. So it was really a very good meeting. I'm going to keep going, Steve. The RRR, the Rural Resort Region, which is really not RRR, it's the workforce group. We no longer have quarterly meetings. Somehow they were able to change that. I thought it was statutorily required. We're now working with them. Nan Sundin and I are working, Sam are working with them on a more one-to-one basis, face-to-face, trying to see what we can actually get done over here in the Roaring Fork Valley in Pickens County, because we really haven't received hardly any services. So we're trying to gear up some projects and things we might be able to do here to really utilize what workforce opportunities are out there. So that's where that one, Steve. I'm just going to keep going here. Healthy Forest Collaborative is still on here. It doesn't exist. And Kelly and I have both kind of been splitting the child care thing with Basalt. It's not really an appointment we have. We were just invited to participate. It's really interesting to hear what's going on Mid-Valley, and there's a lot that's being discussed in Mid-Valley, especially as far as a regional or some kind of child care funding source, which I think is, again, of interest. ACRA, obviously we had a great weekend. The Food and Wine is, an ACRA event. It was people from all over the world. The weather was perfect for it. The park did, of course, pay a price, which is kind of brutal when you're out there trampling down that beautiful grass that they just, put down. But it's a great event, and there's just activity everywhere. And other than that, ACRA, everything was pretty much focused in that direction. We have had some change in board members with ACRA. They're, again, really involved with our energy and our building code proposed possible changes, which is good to have that. They have a new member on ACRA who represents the construction industry, and he does a great job, Sam. He does a great job. So that's been really of interest. But other than that, I think that's all I have to say.
Okay. Kelly, do you want to cover yours?
Sure. So QQ just had a meeting last
Basalt.
Friday. It was in Carbondale at the
Carbondale,
3rd
oh.
Street Center. They have incorporated a real educational component to their meetings, which is very helpful for me. So there was a woman from the Colorado, no, I forget where she's from. She's from the state, the collaboration of all the basin roundtables, and came up and presented on all of the different types of in-stream diversions that are, I wouldn't say available, but possible. So recreational in-stream diversion like we have in Basalt, and then negotiated agreements and such like that. Tori, who is the staff liaison for QQ, gave a presentation on an update to an economic drivers plan. So looking at how in-stream diversions help economies in the headwaters regions. And she's kind of perfecting that presentation and will make it available. And then April Long from Rawapa presented to look at just the Roaring Fork Valley and in-stream diversions that are dedicated here and now. And also presented some very interesting evidence of how many days in an average year we don't meet those those in-stream flow rights, particularly through the section that runs through Aspen. And so in a drought year, it was like upwards of, I forget.
The
it was
people
like
aren't getting their
100+
water.
days where that in-stream flow right. So for environmental benefit, et cetera, wasn't being met. So that was super interesting stuff.
So maybe that's where our negotiated settlement with Aurora can help in our. So this year we'll have the water to call, but we know we might not want to call the water.
Yeah, and that did come up as one approach to how communities can access and protect in-stream rights. And then there was some legislation that was introduced this year that died. And so we talked about sort of the energy around looking at that again in the future. What else? We talked about someone came up from DNR who is in charge of the rulemaking process for the oil and gas legislation that passed, and broke it down for how they're approaching that and where local governments should probably be most engaged. And so I'm going to kind of pass those notes up to the attorney's office as well. What else? What other groups am I on?
So is Rachel the city's rep now to QQ?
Yes, she is. And Greg was there with me as well. CCI, so Steve and I went to a CCI conference in Keystone. Gosh, was that 2 weeks ago already? Covered a lot. I think one of the highlights is we heard from many of the governor's appointees. So DOLA,
Dan Gibbs there from DNR.
Dan Gibbs, Jill Ryan, CDOT, who else?
Who's the new CDOT director? Do we have a
Health and
new?
Human Services, I forget her name.
Michelle from Health and Human Services. Janice,
With CDOT?
somebody from CDOT, a woman.
Yeah. Have
Yeah,
they
sorry,
ever
I
had a
don't know
woman
what's
as
upstairs,
CDOT
but-
director? I don't know if they've ever had a woman in that position.
Yeah, and very accomplished. I mean,
Yeah.
she seems very young, but very accomplished in her career. So that was interesting, and they presented what they call the WIGs, the wildly important goals. So the governor has given these WIGs to each of his department heads, to which they will be measurable to. And so they talked about some of those. For example, like one of Dan Gibbs's is to figure out more stable funding sources outside of hunting and fishing licensing for his department. Jill Ryan's she has like 5 that really cover a gamut, including mental health, vaccines, climate change, and I think there were 2 more that I'm forgetting. So it was very interesting to hear from them on that, and we just met with other commissioners from around the state.
Didn't the governor do something, a rulemaking about vaccines in light of the fact that bill failed? I just thought I read something. It couldn't go as far
Like an
as
executive
that.
order, yeah. So we also went to a CCAT retreat, which is the other county group that we're part of, just immediately after CCI. And Jill Ryan came to that and, spoke to us directly, and we had a conversation about vaccines. So the governor was not supportive of the legislation to remove personal exemptions as an allowable reason to not
Yeah,
be
that's-
vaccinated. So they're taking a different tact for trying to increase the vaccination rates.
I think he did a rulemaking.
I don't know if it's rulemaking or executive order, but
Oh, it could
So
have been an
they've-
executive order.
yeah, so they've identified areas of the state that they want to do kind of some vaccine blitzes and put funding toward like mobile vaccination clinics and specific
Funding for the-
outreach for communities that aren't reaching the vaccine thresholds that they should be reaching.
and
So that's the approach.
A lot of it was finding a funding source, so parents couldn't use the fact they couldn't afford it as a reason not to try it, and that's a great place to start, I think.
Yep, we also had an interesting conversation about mental health, and I relayed what is happening in our community, and just also very pointedly asked, how does gun access play into the discussion about reduction of suicides, which is part of what the governor's aim towards his mental health interest is. So tough.
One interesting thing and kind of sad news from CCAT is Sarah Odendahl, who is one of the lobbyists who's worked for the Ponte lobbying firm for 12 years, is moving to Oregon. So, and she was a very effective lobbyist, and she won't be working with us anymore. So it's kind of a sad thing. We actually just got the email on that. We didn't hear that at the retreat, or I didn't. I don't
Yeah,
know.
no, I
Did they
didn't hear
let
that,
on at
no.
all?
Nope. So.
So I think everybody at CCAT was really excited about the progress made in the legislature this year on a broad number of issues that CCAT was working on. And the affordable housing one was actually a CCAT initiative that legislation was crafted around the proposal from CCAT, and it passed. So everybody was pretty tickled about that.
And I'll forward some more information about, I think there's 176 million new dollars going towards affordable housing over the next 10 years. And DOLA has organized these 5, I think, public outreach sessions to talk about those programs. So it might be of interest to us. They also spent a good amount of time, I think, director of insurance came up, not Mike Conway, but someone immediately below him came up, and the Peak Health Alliance presented on what the Peak Health Alliance is doing, and tied that to legislation that passed to empower other communities to put together a similar model. And
Is the Peak Health Alliance the one out of Vail?
Summit County.
Summit
Yeah.
County.
With Vail Valley Partnership or something. Aren't they involved? Thought they were.
Their community foundation.
They're kind of a co-op
started.
model.
Yeah.
Almost.
Yeah. And what was interesting for me was distinctions between what are we doing here with the Valley Health Alliance and what they were doing. And I think the big difference was that they have negotiated products that could be available to the wider markets, wider insurance markets. So people who are on the individual exchange and small businesses as well, where, we've focused ours on how do self-insured providers collaborate together to provide for their network. They're doing that, but then also have created and negotiated products that other people in the community can participate in.
Vail Valley must be involved in the effort that's trying to emerge out of Eagle County.
That would be
you-
my guess.
Yeah.
So I think and then CC4CA we'll talk more about next week.
After,
And
yeah.
CCI, we have time scheduled, I think, in the next 2 weeks to discuss their any
That's next.
legislative priorities.
With
so-
we're supposed to fill out that
Yeah, we
form.
need to
Yeah.
put some thought to that if we have anything that Picken County wants to bring forward.
Real
Now's
estate
the
transfer
time
tax.
to be coming up with.
Well, there's some energy around business licensing, county authorities, and I think CCAT was one that said that there's a feeling that from the governor's office that there might be opportunities to discuss how counties can expand their authorities. And so the authority to business license.
Didn't a bill emerge and
talked
it didn't
about
get
this.
anywhere? Didn't it get to that point this last session though?
The business license has come up, with CCI, I think the past few legislative sessions, and
But it
it
didn't get-
hasn't passed, but I think the politics of it have probably changed with this last election, potentially. And I think maybe
Well, it
that's
makes
what
sense, I don't-
CCI is seeing.
Yeah.
So there's some encouragement to think about what is there an ask for expanding county authority and what would we ask for? That's it. What I missed, Steve?
Let's see, Club 20 is coming to the town of Snowmass Village on July 11th and 12th. And unfortunately, I'm gonna be out of town right then. That's when I'm able to go be with my daughter in Alaska. I will be able to go to the meeting 2 weeks later in Pagosa Springs. These are the policy meetings. So I'm sure Rachel, I haven't talked to her yet, but since she's the secretary of Club 20, and she'll probably be there, but if any of you want to go to any of those sessions,
I think Kelly will be busy.
And Kelly, you'll hopefully you will not be going,
I probably won't sign up for that one, no.
unless you're a glutton for punishment, for punishing them with a crying
Or she just
baby.
needs to get out of the house.
Let's see, the Colorado Basin Roundtable,
Yes. I did go to that.
did you go to,
Let me pull up my notes here real quick. And then I'm also going to the Four Basin Roundtable meeting this Thursday in Grand Junction.
This Thursday, like, and then come back for E EOTC?
Yep, so I'm gonna leave there a little bit early.
and
Be
that's
careful
gonna
out
be,
there.
they're gonna have a live stream kind of a thing on that, so I'm gonna try to watch as much of that as possible.
Maybe that's what Rachel was talking about
I
going
think
to.
that should be an interesting meeting, and I'm glad that you're able to go for part of it anyhow.
Yeah, let's see.
Senior council
Notes.
has not met they have had the special event at the library, where the listening session on the aging well plan, like the revisions to that. And, there will be a meeting, there should be a meeting tomorrow, and then the senior soiree next week.
Next Tuesday?
On Tuesday, which I urge everybody to go to that if you're able to. And that's really all I have for adding on to anything else. On Club 20, we did receive a reply, which I haven't had a chance to
Oh, the
read
letter?
yet. The letter.
Saying that they did not take a position and they thanked us and wanted us to stay part of the organization. It was
Missed
two
the
or three
point.
paragraphs of, yeah, thank you for your letter, we're not, yeah.
So, any other updates on any issues?
I think the only thing I want to raise was discussion that's come up in a couple of the different meetings that I've been at is the campaign around the debrucing, statewide debrucing measure for this fall's ballot. The campaign in support of it has not been like stood up yet. So there's some angst around that.
Yeah, if they're not moving now, how are they gonna get it together by November?
Right, so it's just something I think, we need to maybe keep on our radar and.
Can we
I
get
don't know
somebody
if
up
we
here to
need
do a
have
presentation
dialogue,
or something?
Oh,
there's
about it,
nobody.
about taking a position on it or
Yeah.
not.
So if there's no committee organized, I guess we can't invite anybody up here to speak to us.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know who we would reach out to right now. Do you?
I mean, I would reach out to Representative McCluskey just to ask, her, who she.
Maybe we
thinks
have
would be
Kara follow up
best,
on that, see if there's anything going out there, and we could get somebody here. Be informative for us and be informative for our voters.
The one issue, now I don't know if it's the debrucing, about the single issue thing was in terms of repealing the Tabor completely.
Gutting it and starting over again.
And it was ruled that it is just a one issue the one issue it said, shall the Tabor amendment be repealed? So it was a one issue thing, although the Tabor amendment had many different
Because Tabor
components
was
of it.
passed as one issue.
Yeah, and so apparently it was just ruled that it can go on the ballot. Now, that's not that many months away. Well, a lot of times,
Not sure the
bunch of
taxpayers want
signatures
to give
still
up
need
their
to be
right to vote
collected
on
and everything.
taxes.
I don't know a lot about that.
Real estate transfer tax would be nice. I've been saying that since 1998.
So is there anything else for the good of the order today? What time were we gonna meet to?
2:45.
2:45 in 12 minutes.
Okay, I'm gonna get my stuff together and I'll meet you at the intercept lot. No, I won't. I will meet you at the Brush Creek Park and Ride.
The Brush Creek Park and Ride.
Good
You are
job.
correct. I almost made
Do you
the
know where
same
that
mis-
is?
Now, one day Molly texted me and she said, what would BC on the sign on a Raptor bus mean? And I'm like, I don't know. I could
Before
not-
Christ.
I could not think what BC would mean. Well, it was Brush Creek was what the BC abbreviation stands for, so. All right.
All right.
Grassroots, we are
See you
done
guys
for
there.
the
Thank
day.
you,
Thank you very
Grassroots.
much.
And we will be back here on Thursday at